Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking with you about extended school year, or ESY for short. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, the first question that you're probably asking is, well, Jasmine, what is extended school year? Well, extended school year is a summer program that is a continuation of the services that your child receives during the school year. So, just to be clear, it's not summer school, it's not enrichment, it's not remediation, it's not tutoring. It is the exact same programming that your child receives during the school year under the IEP, just in the summertime. Everything that your child is entitled to under their IEP during the regular school year transfers to extended school year. So, for example, if your child has goals that they're working toward during the regular school year, they will be working towards those goals in the extended school year program. If your child receives certain accommodations and modifications during the regular school year, they will receive those same accommodations and modifications during extended school year. If your child has certain supports, such as a paraprofessional or transportation services, those will continue with the extended school year services. If your child receives their special education services during the regular school year in a certain setting, then that setting will also transfer to extended school year. The extended school year program is meant as an additional support and service that districts can use to provide students with a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE for short. So with that being said, extended school year is always going to be offered to families at no additional cost. And if a student is already receiving transportation services, they will continue to receive them when they're getting extended school year. However, if your child does not normally receive transportation services during the school year, an exception will be made if your child is eligible for extended school year, and they will receive transportation services in order to ensure that they have FAPE. And the reason for this is because typically extended school year is not offered at the school that your child typically attends during the school year. I can't speak for how other districts handle this, but at my district, we are broken up into 17 networks within the district, and each network, we have one school that offers ESY services to all of the students within that network. And so you would be getting transported from your home to that school. Even if you're just a few blocks away, they just offer the service as a convenience to everyone. You may not have the same services in your district. I'm just giving you an example of how it works in the district that I work in. So, who determines whether or not your child is eligible for extended school year services? Well, the answer to that is the IEP team. In fact, if you want your child to receive extended school year services, you have to have a formal IEP meeting to discuss this with the team. So it should be discussed at the regular annual IEP meeting, but in a lot of cases, if the team doesn't feel like the child needs it, they don't really bring it up at the meeting. And so in some cases, this may be a secondary or additional meeting later in the school year to discuss the need for extended school year services if the parent or a member of the team recognizes a need for it. When an IEP team is meeting to determine whether or not a student is eligible for extended school year services, there are a handful of factors that they would take into consideration when determining eligibility. And some of those factors are the progress that the child is currently making towards their IEP goals, whether or not they're really, really close to meeting a goal and are very close to a breakthrough, whether or not they have behavior that impacts their ability to access instruction during the school year. We can consider the nature or the severity of their disability. We can think about the vocational goals of that child and whether or not this child needs extra time in order to meet that goal so that they can gain the vocational skills that they're working toward. Another consideration when determining eligibility for extended school year, and this is probably the most popular one is regression and recoupment. Now, regression is the loss of skills after an extended break. This could be after winter break or Thanksgiving break or spring break, or it even could just be after a long weekend. If a child is working on a particular goal and we go on Thanksgiving break and we're out for a week and we come back and that child has significantly fallen behind on meeting their goal, that would be regression. Recoupment is the time that it takes a child to recover those lost skills. So for example, that child who regressed after an extended week off of school, say a reasonable amount of time for a child to recover after being off for a week is about 3 or 4 days, but we find that it's been 2 or 3 weeks and this child is just barely getting back to the point that they were before that break. That student would probably be a really good candidate for extended school year, because in my district we're off for 10 weeks. And if a student is making gains, or if a student has a tendency to regress after breaks, a lot of information can be lost during a 10-week break from school without any instruction. In a nutshell, if a child is likely to lose critical skills during a break, and it's unlikely that they'll be able to recover those skills in a reasonable amount of time, then this child is probably a good candidate for extended school year services. While regression and recoupment data tends to be the most frequently used method for determining whether or not a child is eligible for extended school year services, it doesn't have to be the only type of measure that the team uses. If there is a lack of regression and recoupment data, a school can use a review of the child's goals and their progress towards those goals as a measure. They can do classroom observations of how that child is performing. They can use existing progress monitoring data that's already available to the team. The teacher is already progress monitoring that child's growth towards their goals in their IEP. And so if the team looks at that data that the teacher is collecting and say they collect it bi-weekly, and they notice that the child was at one level of proficiency before the break, but then after a break they dramatically decrease in their proficiency, they can use that progress monitoring data in order to determine eligibility for ESY. They can also use a student's score on class assessments, and they can also use curriculum-based assessments as well. So how can you as a parent request extended school year services for your child? Well, the first recommendation I have for you is to request that in writing. Remember, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And when you make your request in writing, make sure that you're requesting an actual IEP meeting, because ESY services have to be a part of the IEP. And because there's going to be a revision to your child's IEP, there does need to be a formal meeting with all members of the IEP team. When you make your request for this IEP meeting, you should also take into consideration that typically there needs to be a 10-day window between the date of the IEP meeting and the date that the IEP meeting is scheduled. So when you reach out to the team requesting this meeting, and they give you a date that appears to be a couple of weeks out, don't freak out. They're not blowing you off. Just there does need to be that 10-day window between the day the meeting is scheduled and the date of the actual meeting, so that everyone has time to prepare. Another factor to consider is that in order for the team to make a determination about whether or not your child is eligible for extended school year services, they may need to conduct some assessments. And so the date of the actual IEP meeting may be even farther out than the 10-day minimum that's required, because that critical data does need to be collected. A recommendation that I have for parents who suspect that their child may need extended school year services is to reach out to the team about a month before spring break. And the reason for this is because typically schools assess their students at the beginning of the school year, the middle of the school year, and the end of the school year. And when I say the school assesses the student, I mean they typically have district-wide or statewide assessments that are administered to students. And so if your child's school takes middle of the school year standardized assessments, you can see how your child performed on that right around winter break time. Sometimes schools test them before winter break, sometimes schools test them after winter break, but there's usually something in the middle of the school year. And so you will already have that assessment data for how your child was doing in the middle of the school year. Now, because your school has that middle of the school year data, and they know that you're suspecting that your child may be eligible for extended school year, now in preparation for spring break, which is the next long break in the school year, the team can start collecting data about how your child is performing. How are they progressing towards their goals? And then we can do a baseline assessment before sending your child away for spring break. When we return from spring break, the team can conduct another assessment to see if your child regressed at all, or if they were still able to maintain the same level of proficiency that they were at before the break. If your child does experience some regression during that break, then the team can then begin to collect data on how long it takes your child to recoup those skills and get back to where they were before spring break. Once all of that data is collected, the team can have a better idea of whether or not your child is eligible for extended school year services. And also, this puts us really close to the end of the school year testing window, where we can actually get another formal assessment that's comparable to the one your child received in the middle of the school year, and we can measure how well your child is performing from prior to spring break to after spring break. You typically want to have as much data as possible when you're making this kind of decision. If at all possible, as the parent, when you are requesting the IEP meeting to discuss extended school year services, you should come with your own copies of students' assessments that they've completed in their classroom, results of their IEP progress reports, and recommendations from any specialist that your child is working with. Something I want all parents to keep in mind when they're requesting extended school year services for their child is that this may not take one IEP meeting to resolve. You may have an initial IEP meeting with the team where you discuss your desire for your child to receive extended school year services. But like I said earlier, the team may need to conduct additional information. You may need to gather additional information to make the case for extended school year for your child. And so I just encourage you to be really patient and be open to meeting with the team a couple of times in order to determine eligibility. Another consideration that I want parents to make is that if you are noticing that your child may benefit from extended school year services, it's also possible that their teacher has noticed that there is a need there as well. And so another route that you can take instead of initially requesting an IEP meeting is to reach out to your child's teacher and see what the teacher thinks. If the teacher is noticing the same thing that you are noticing, the two of you can work together to compile the data needed to make the case for extended school year services. And in this case, when you reach out to the rest of the team to have that formal meeting, you and the teacher can come united with enough data to make the case for it, and then that way it can be resolved in one meeting and it can be wrapped up quickly without a need for additional information to be collected. As always, anytime that you are communicating with your child's teacher or any members of the IEP team, make sure that you get everything in writing, and always make sure that any requests that you make are rooted in data and that you have access to the data needed to support any requests that you make from the team. With that, that is all of the information that I have for you today about extended school year. If you have any additional questions, please leave a comment. If the information in this video was valuable to you, please subscribe. If you want additional tips on how to participate in IEP meetings in a more meaningful way, I will link my tips for meaningful parent participation somewhere up here. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.